Welcome, aspirants. In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct the Prime Minister's recent address at the NDTV World Summit. We'll break down all the key themes, the crucial data, and the concepts you absolutely need to know, and we'll structure it perfectly for your exam preparation. So, how are we going to tackle this for your exams? Well, first, we'll get into the core unstoppable India thesis. Then, we'll dive right into the economic and governance shifts that really form the backbone of the argument. After that, we'll look at the key claims on security and welfare before pulling it all together into a really powerful summary for your revision. Okay, let's get started. All right, let's kick things off with the core message, what's being called the unstoppable India thesis. The speech opened with this really powerful quote, and it set a very confident tone right from the get-go. Now, the strategy here is all about contrast. It's about positioning India's current momentum against a world that's facing, and I quote, roadblocks and speed breakers. This frames the country as a standout success story. This whole narrative of exceptionalism, it's absolutely central to the entire address. You'll see the entire speech is built on this then versus now framework, and that's a critical concept for you to grasp for your exams. On the left, you've got the highlighted concerns from the pre-2014 era, things like being labeled one of the fragile 5 emerging economies because of some major economic vulnerabilities. But then on the right, you see the claimed transformation, becoming a top 5 global economy and really embracing this vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which, as you know, translates to a self-reliant India. Let's move on to Section 2, the economic shift. Now, this is where we get into the nitty-gritty, the specific data points that were used to really back up this narrative of moving from fragile to the forefront. Okay, so what's the data used to support this big claim? The speech highlighted an average growth rate of 7.8% over the last 3 years, and inflation clocking in at below 2%. These figures are presented as hard evidence of a major economic turnaround. You should also make a note of the S&P credit rating upgrade. It was the first one in 17 years. That's a really significant indicator of renewed confidence, and it sits alongside strong growth in exports. To really drive home this point about global confidence, one single powerful number was used, $100 billion. That's the committed investment from the European Free Trade Association, or EFTA. It's a figure that's meant to underscore a deep faith in the Indian economy and its potential for creating a massive number of jobs. The speech also zoomed in on some key strategic sectors that are attracting major investment. Now, to remember these for your exam, you can use a simple contextual mnemonic. Just think of the word gas. That's G for green energy, A for AI, like Google's huge $15 billion commitment, and S for semiconductors, which is seeing a major push for domestic manufacturing. This quote, it perfectly encapsulates the government's stated policy philosophy. What it suggests is a proactive approach to challenges, basically turning potential crises into opportunities for some really fundamental change. So how do you frame that philosophy so it's easy to remember? Think of it as the 4R transformation framework. It's a simple progression that's super easy to recall in your answers when you need to explain the policy approach. It goes from risk to reform to resilience and finally to revolution. Okay, let's move on to Section 3 and see how this all builds. We're now focusing on governance and the argument that there's been a major shift from bureaucratic control to what the speech calls the democratization of policy. This slide really lays out a sharp contrast. The core argument here is a shift away from a top-down, restrictive system. For instance, moving from a banking system that was seen as pretty distant from the poor to one that now has over 50 crore Jan Dhan accounts. Or, think about this, going from needing an MP's recommendation for a gas connection to providing over 10 crore free connections. The central theme here is direct citizen empowerment. And here it is, the headline figure. This was presented as the ultimate result of this new governance approach, 25 crore. That's the number of people who were claimed to have been lifted out of poverty over the last 11 years, a really critical data point to remember from the speech. Next up, Section 4. Here we're covering 2 critical areas mentioned in the speech, internal security with a specific focus on Naxalism and improvements in citizen welfare, or what's being called ease of living. The speech made sure to highlight a focused strategy to counter Naxalism. It was described as a grave injustice against the nation's youth, especially in that region known as the Red Corridor, and that's a key term you should definitely remember. The key takeaway here is this drastic, step-by-step reduction that was presented in the speech. The claim is a huge drop from over 225 affected districts all the way down to just 11, with only 3 remaining as highly affected. The strategy that was emphasized was one of reintegrating those who surrendered back into the mainstream, framing it as both a security win and a social success. The speech then connects technological advancement directly to this idea of ease of living. It cites the development of an indigenous 4G stack by BSNL as a major milestone. But more importantly, it links that tech to direct citizen benefits through schemes like e-Sanjeevani for teleconsultations and the massive cost savings from Ayushman Bharat, Jan Aushadhi Kendras, and of course the dramatic reduction in data prices. All right, let's pull all of this together now. Here is your final revision summary with every single key takeaway you'll need for your exam. Take a second to just absorb this. These are the core facts, figures, and concepts you should take away. You've got the central theme, the key jargon you might come across, all the hard economic data, the governance shift, and those headline figures on poverty and security. We've also included the major welfare schemes, the tech milestone, and of course, our 2 mnemonics, the 4R transformation framework and GAS for key investments. This slide really covers all the dimensions we discussed. So the speech paints a very clear picture of a confident and transforming India. The critical question for you to think about is this. As this vision unfolds, what new opportunities and what new challenges will arise on the global stage? Thanks for joining this explainer.